Hello class, in this week's lab we will be covering how to implement security using PHP and MySQL to implement first a registration page for the users and then implement a login screen so that you can authenticate the user. And finally, we're going to create a logout screen that actually kills the session of the user. And then we're gonna create a secret page that once you log in, you're able to access. Now, this is gonna mimic an authentication system that a user can access only if they're logged in, right? So, and then finally, for the actually self-guided lab, you're gonna be using this method to implement it across your user site, and you're also gonna be using some profile customization. So for example, when a user logs in, their the color they chose will be applied across the site. Their username is going to be displayed, and then the access by is going to be changed to who they are. All right, so that's just going to be a little bit additional work for you, but it should be relatively simple if you take into consideration that this should be applied to your project as well. Alright, so with that said, we can just get started. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to see exactly how this thing works. So the very first thing you're going to go to is the Metro website, and go out to Lab 8 on the demo site. Alright, so as you can see here, I'm on the landing page, so I'm gonna log in. As user C, and password is 1234. You can see here. You can see that this is the input password and the hash password, and they're not equivalent because this is using the PHP hashing algorithm, and they're supposed to be different every time you log in. The hashing algorithm will take care of it. Again, after I log in, it takes me to the secret page, which is, of course, this is my profile, but I can actually go in and edit here, and this is just a link to the stuff in Lab 7. So yeah, that's how the page is supposed to work. Now, if I click on log out, so click on log out, it actually takes me back to the it me to log out page, and from here I can click back to the main login page. So that's the overall functionality of the website of the lab. And again, we're also going to implement a registration function. So if I click register here, right, then I should be able to enter all these forms in. Username, password. The second password has to match, so that has to be part of your logic. Put in an email, first name, last name, middle name, and then a date. Birth date. Right, so I'm gonna set this to 1990. And I'm gonna change the color to red. Right, so I'm gonna save that. And it should save the profile, and then I'll go back to the login page, and then I can log in using that user. Again, it should validate that, and actually, here you see that my changes have persisted. My secret page has all the username stuff, and I can go in, edit the profile, choose an image, upload something. So choose Spider-Man here. Now it's slow to load because it's such a big image. It's a 4K image, so. And then save. Now, the bigger images you have, the longer it takes it to load. So just keep in mind, keep your images small, right? And that's pretty much it. So this is the functionality of the site that you have to get it matched up. And when I press cancel, I should just go back to the main profile page. Now this is all stuff that you did in Lab 7. So go back to Lab 8, and it should take me back to that login screen. Now if I go and type in secret on the PHP page up here, it'll take me to the secret page. So because I'm still logged in. So if I log out, then it'll take me to the login page again. And if I type in secret again, now if I type in secret again, it should show you are not logged in, and that profile page should not show up. All right. So and now I can log back in. Once I do, I should be able to access the secret page now. Again, you see my profile here. Alright, so that's the functionality of the page, and we're just going to dive into the code now. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to your demo page. Your demo code, you see I have it marked down here. Just open it right up, and then this is my demo code. Again, the next thing you're going to do is you're just going to modify your Lab 8 page. So go into Labs, and then go to Lab 8. So the first thing we're going to do is going to go out to localhost demo site, and because I'm opening this up in a demo context, and navigate to the Lab 8. And as you can see, it's completely blank here because we haven't done anything to it yet. So so what we're going to do is we're actually going to go. We're gonna build this interface. So the first thing we're gonna do is create an OB start here. The OB start, the object interface here, to capture our output, and then we're just gonna close that, and we're gonna open up another PHP tag here. Don't forget the PHP, but we're gonna do OB clean into the results, right? And then we're just going to output the, we're going to assign the output to our content in the page object. All right. Then we're just going to say welcome. So we're just going to put that PHP opening tag here, and then when we refresh the page, it should actually output what we want. So this is your basic OB clean stuff. If you've done Lab 7, then you understand that this is how it works. It's been like this ever since the beginning. Again, if I close that and I reopen it, then you'll generate some errors. All right, so the next step here is to create your form. So here I'm pasting in a simple form. All right, so it's essentially a login form. Well, it's not a login form, but it's the result of our login. All right, so again, you can see here that there's a login header, and then that says you successfully logged in, and essentially a counter that will say that a counter timer that will actually count down, and then a link to the logout page. And so pause the video here and basically implement this code. All right, so if I go out to the page and I do a refresh, you'll see that this is what happens. All right, so you've created a logout page, a login form, right? And this will click on the link will direct you to the secret page, but of course that page is broken for now, but we can fix that. All right, so the next step is to create a countdown script. All right, so here we're just gonna put in some JavaScript to do that. And so this is the JavaScript to decrement the counter. Okay, so if I save this, go out to my page again, you'll see that the timer starts counting backwards. All right. So what we want to happen here is that by the time the timer counts to 0, we want it to redirect to a different page. Okay. So now we're going to bring in our form. It should go right after the div here. And again, this is a standard login form with a username, password, and a submit button. The submit button should be labeled submit. The name should be login, because we're gonna check for that name upon submitting the form. So we are also including a registration link here. You could it links to the register.php page, but we haven't really implemented that yet. Finally, we have a submit button again. The button name should be login, and we have a cancel button on the bottom here to basically redirect us back to the Lab 8 page. Finally, we're going to navigate out to our main page, right? So again, once we saved it and navigate out, you see that we have our login form on the bottom here, and then you still have your counter up in there. So we're going to implement some logic to hide this, right? So going into our code, we actually just have to have an if-else statement here to check to see if we're logged in or not. Again, the site looks a little bit wide, so we're going to go into we're going to have this login form class here, and in this login form class, we're going to override the styles of the standard Bootstrap card logic. So right here, we're just gonna inject a login form class here. So by setting the width to 600 in this login form class and saving it, we should be able to override that class and set everything equal to a nicer looking form, right? So this width is applied across the forms, and it looks a little bit better now. It's nice and small. It doesn't fill the whole page like it did before. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put some logic in here to hide that the first form based on whether or not the form has been submitted. So I'm just going to go if is set post login to check to see if the login button down here has been pressed. Once we verify that, then we're just going to jump into the logic of displaying that first part of the first form. So right here, we're going to add the end tag here for the PHP. We're going to put that end bracket down here, and then it's going to remove it from the top up here. And then, yeah, if only, so based on this logic, if we press the login button, right, only if we press the login button will the other form show up. So if we press the login button here, the other form's going to show up, but the other one, our form down there will still show up, right? So part of the logic is to add the else in there. And once we add the else in here, then it's going to hide that form. And we're just going to put the else all the way in the bottom here. So save this code, and then when we go back to look at the page, you'll see that it's actually we've already pressed the submit button, so this is what shows up. All right. And you notice that our counter isn't working, so in order to get that working, we're going to move that outside of the else statement here. And to do that, I'm going to put it right outside the form here. We can get rid of that bracket down there and put it up here. Alright. So, how does that work? Well, there you go. So it works now. The timer is counting down like we want it to. And yeah, so if we go back to the login page, you'll see that the other form doesn't show up until we press login, and now it shows up. And again, we have a link here. Right, so to create that secret page, we just simply go to our labs folder and create a secret.php page. Save that, and then we're also going to create a registration page. Just call it register.php. Right, so in this page, so in the register page, we want to be able to create a form that allows the user to register. So if I go to my secret page, it's nothing yet because the layout hasn't been implemented yet, right? This will be true for the register page as well. So all I have to do is copy that code on top there and paste it right into here, and then close that out, and then do the OB and the PHP down here, and copy the other code right into it, right? Just like that. Right. So we can say my super secret page here. So if I save this, well, I'll make it H1 so it stands out. Alright, so that's good. So if I refresh it, alright, so we have a nice looking super secret page now. Again, if I go log in, it'll go there, and then I can go to my super secret page. So you see that the flow now works, right? So the next step is to create a registration page. So in order to do that, we do the same copy and paste mechanism. Again, you want to change the name and title here to secret page. And then we're just going to copy and paste that. Again, that changes the header subtitle. This changes the title that you see on your tab. Alright. We're going to copy this, and we're just going to copy it over to the register page. And then we're going to change the header subtitle to registration. And then the title to registration as well. And that should create our registration page. So as you can see, when I click on my registration page, my register button there, it actually takes my registration page. Now we're gonna implement a form here, of course. So we're just gonna. So in the interest of time, I just copy and pasted this form from the registration form. This is pretty much a copy and paste of the user profile, except I took out the picture, and then just rename the header here to registration form. As you can see, we have most of the fields here for the user profile itself. Again, you have a header, you have a username, password, and there's a password, the label of the password. You have a second password that's used to verify the password field. Again, this is not in the standard user profile, but this is something that I added in because we're going to need a password field to create a authentication system. So we actually need to do this. And then the next part is the email. Again, we set the type as an email form in order so that we can actually so that it does automatic validation. HTML5 allows you to do that, so that's why you can have an input email form, input email field, and that would be automatically checked by HTML. Again, as you can see, all of these fields here are essentially required. So because we have the required tag here, the validation is gonna fail if the fields are blank. So that's part of it too. Again, the next few fields are first name, your last name, your middle name. Okay, so here we have also the color field, the date field. In the date itself, you have to have if you set it as a date field, it will create a calendar on the control itself, and you can actually set the dates properly. Next is the color field. If you set the input type to color, it's actually a color picker. And finally, we have the submit field, the submit button that actually saves button. Note the name here is save because we're actually going to be checking for that value when we actually do the form submission. So it's fairly important that you actually have this name properly named so that, yeah, you can actually look it up later. The next field, the cancel button, and that allows us to actually navigate back to the root page. And that's pretty much it for the registration form. So here we go and we load the form, and this is what and this actually creates the form right here. Now you see this error is because we actually have. So the error we saw is because we have this refer inside the form. Well, we have to create the refer object, and then yep. So it's just the previous page equals server HTTP refer, right? Okay, and after do that, the error should actually be resolved. Okay, so after we save the refer into the previous page variable here, we can actually put this input this input variable down here as the refer of the page. Now we're gonna actually implement some logic to here. So we're gonna first we're gonna have an errors flag. This will allow us to track the number of errors within our form submission, and using this we can set certain things, we can toggle certain things on and off in the page itself. Next, we're going to check to see if our form has been submitted by checking the post variable. Again, this should be underscore post. Save. Here we're checking the save variable of the post and see if it's set, right? And then if it is set, then we're gonna say we're gonna do the alert. We're gonna set a variable alert with a success. Now this is refer back to your lab 7. This is the same code that's being implemented here. I'm going to initialize the errors to 0 since we successfully entered the post save here. So at this point, there's no errors yet. Then we're going to do the extract of the post variables in this array. Again, we want to add a prefix if it exists, so we can go extra prefix same, and prefix it with a post. All right. And finally, so in the interest of time, I pasted some code here to check the values of the form, right? So it should echo out the values as I press submit here. So we ran into a little bit of an issue here, but let's fix it really quick and let's proceed. So as you can see, we're just missing this closing bracket here. And now when we refresh our page, we should actually let's see what's happening here. Scroll down a little bit. I think it should just be something very simple that we forgot. So as you can see, the error is actually just up in this post save method up here. That's causing this minor little issue that we're having. So once we change that and we reload the page, we actually have all of our values that we're looking for up there. So now that we know this works, we're gonna try submitting something else, and hopefully that actually persisted. And then we save it. So as you can see, our change is being persisted across, right? So now that works, we're just gonna add one more row down here, the color, and set a color value here, save it, and then refresh the page, and the color actually shows up. All right. So with that done, we're just going to jump into doing some logic of saving this, actually saving this data to the database. We're going to comment this out and press Control K and C to comment out selected items. All right. So the next step is just to bring in our database functionality. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a connection variable, and then we're going to assign the database connection to it. If you recall from your Lab 7, we just do a DB pointer to new connection and create a new connection. Now this should actually call our database class that we instantiated earlier, in the database object that we brought in, and this will create a database connection. And then we're going to assign this equal to, go to select star from user where username equals username. The reason we're just trying to pull the user from the database that equals the current username that we're logging in as. Finally, we're going to do a user equals. We're going to pull a user array from the DB by getting the array with the database class, with the database function that we implemented in the database layer. Again, if the user is empty, we're going to say alert equals danger, result equals error. Again, this is the pattern we used in the previous lab. Otherwise, we're going to say, otherwise we'll implement the rest of our logic. We're going to create a new hash password by using the password hash function in PHP with the default type of bcrypt. It doesn't necessarily have to be bcrypt. You can use password default. It's the same as bcrypt, but I just wanted to be specific in this case. And then we're gonna insert the current user into the system if it doesn't already exist. All right, so the previous step we actually check to make sure that the user doesn't exist because you don't really want to add a new user if a user is already existing in the database. So this first check actually checks to make sure that the user doesn't exist in the system first, and then we'll do our insert. Again, we're using the same pattern as we did in the last lab to do these SQL queries, right? So here we're going to be using the prepare SQL functionality in MySQLi. Okay, so with prepare, we just pass in the query. We have two strings, so we bind those parameters to string objects, and here we're storing the hash password, not the plain text password, and then we're also storing the username in there, and then we're gonna say execute, and then if the execution is true, then we're gonna retrieve the result into R. Otherwise, we're going to return false. And this get result, because we're just doing an insert, it's going to return a true. And then finally, we close out that statement. Now, with MySQLi prepare statements, you always have to close out the statements. If it fails, then we're going to print out an error again. And the error is pretty simple. It's the same pattern as we used above. It's just going to say alert danger error. There was an error saving the user account, and then it's going to spit out the error number of the MySQL's error number and the actual error message. So the next step is to include the user ID from the previous previous insert. Because it's a dynamically generated ID, we have to pull it from the connection itself. And here you can see the user ID is equal to clone user ID, insert ID, which is the ID that we that was generated when we actually did the insert from the statement above. Next thing to do is pretty much insert the user items into the user profile itself. So yeah, we actually do an insert statement here of ID, first name, last name, middle name, date of birth, color, and then the question marks over here represent each object, well, each field. And then we're going to be using the prepare statement again, just like above. So you actually copy the entire code up above, and then we can paste it right into this. All right. So again, it's the same code as above, but here we're binding the different parameters to our SQL object because it has to match what we want, right? So the first thing would be we're going to bind the parameters. The first parameter is the user ID, so it's an integer, so you have to indicate that by using I. And the second parameter, the rest are all strings. You have to indicate their S's. And then you go first name, last name, middle name, date of birth, and color, just as specified. And then finally, we do the execute again. Again, this is just an insert, so it's going to return a true if it's successful. It's false. If it's not successful, we return a false. Again, we do the error check again, saying that our SQL query errored out if this was not successful. Finally, we're going to do a user role. So again, we're using the same user ID as previously, so we're just gonna check our roles really quick. All right, so connect to our local host, and then if I select the role value here. But before we do any saves at all, we want to make sure that the password is a length of 255 characters. Now, you'll run into issues if this password is not updated to have that length. So you have to go into MySQL Workbench and make sure that that password length is greater than 200, greater than 45 characters, because the default is 45. So here we updated it to 255 just for maximum capacity. Now, the hash password is supposed to have a length of 60, but we just want to ensure that future iterations of this application work. So yeah, so with the hashing algorithm here, we're gonna allocate it to be 255. And again, our roles, we have a role of user and administrator. The user role is 2, so we're going to inject that into our query. So we're going to insert into the user role 2, and then we're just going to pass in the user ID using the same pattern as above. So here, all we're doing is binding the user ID parameter to our SQL query. Okay. So again, the standard practice would be to here, and I'll put an error if there's an error in the query. And then finally, you want to close out your connection, and then we save it. At this point, you should have a working save function on the registration form. Again, we want to inject this alert class in here to show that, oh yeah, we've successfully saved the form, right? So here we finally we want to implement the logic of saying that you have successfully saved the form. So if all of our errors are equal to 0, then we're gonna print this message out, and you can actually click on this button to go to the login page after you've successfully and we also want to set our session variables to equal so the session logged in equal to true if we're logged in. We want to move that that closing bracket down after our yeah. So we want to include all of this inside the submit logic here. So we're gonna move that closing bracket all the way down to the end here. And finally, after displaying the successful register here, we actually want us to navigate away from this page automatically. And in doing so, we're putting in this logic of session logged in equals true, user ID equals user ID, display name equals first name, and finally the color equals the color. So all of this stuff is being stored into the session itself. And this very last piece of header refresh equals 10, that actually navigates away from the page within 10 seconds. So in order to store a session, you actually have to instantiate a session. So here we want to do a session start. And this will allow us to save those variables inside the session. So again, we're setting all these session variables into their respective variables. Finally, we can actually do the header refresh by going to a different page, which is just our root page of the login page. Now let's go check our browser. $193. Let's see what the problem is. I think it's because we forgot our closing tag here, our closing bracket here. Yeah. It's most likely the case. So, so here we're gonna inject some code to check out our two different passwords, right? So to verify the password as we type it in, if one password is not equal to the other password, then we're gonna throw a validation error. So here we have a function called validate password, and it'll validate the second password against the first. All right. So again, we're just getting the document ID by password and password 2. And then we're gonna see if the two values equal each other. If they don't, then we're just gonna throw an error saying that they don't match. And we're gonna assign the properties right here, on change and on key up. All right. So with the on change, if you press the submit button and the two are not equivalent, then it'll go into this function and it'll check to see the equivalency. If they're not equal, then it's gonna throw the passwords don't match validation message. I'm gonna save that. We're gonna go back into our form. Now we're gonna reload our form. Again, don't worry too much about the refer issue there. It doesn't really matter too much. No, we're just gonna go rest. Okay. All right, so here we can actually comment this refer out because it's giving us that issue. So we can just actually comment that out, and then we're just gonna go down here and delete this line here. That will get rid of the refer. Once we refresh this page, it should actually load right up. Then we'll go with the test user, right? Now this is going to give us an error because there's probably a username test within our database, but we actually want to check that to make sure that that error shows up, right? So we're going to do that. Now I made the error the passwords bad on purpose, and it actually say the passwords don't match. So we know that the JavaScript function actually works. Again, you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, and now they do match. And when we actually say save, right, we run into all these issues. But we're getting somewhere. So undefined function con and db. Well, the reason for that is because we forgot to import our database structure in. So let's just skip to that. Right. So here we're gonna bring in our database function again. With the slashes in PHP, you want to go / all the time because PHP automatically checks for that in Windows. And on the server, if you're running a Linux server, then it's going to fail. Okay, so now if we refresh this, again, we're going to run into a couple of issues, but now the error here is actually pretty simple. So it's not in this class. It's actually in our registered PHP, and if you can spot the error, then it's fairly obvious. All right. So it's because our connection itself is doing an arrow assignment instead of an equal assignment. So we're gonna actually go into the code and actually correct that. So as you can see, there is actually this arrow pointer right here, and we set it equal and then save it. It'll actually work. Again, we're displaying the user already exists, which is exactly what we want because that user actually does exist in the database. So you can see if we look at our database, the user test is already in there, right? So it means that our error check actually worked, and it doesn't go into that loop of, go into the execution of having inserting the user. So that test actually works. Now we go test 99, and we put a new password in there, 1234, 1234 again, and whatever the emails that shows up. It doesn't matter, right? So, and then a date of birth, and then, yeah, that should do it. And then save it. And voila, it works, right? So we've actually gone to the successfully register, and then we can click there, click here to go to the registration page and to the user login. And now we actually log in, it shouldn't really do anything because we actually haven't implemented that logic yet. Right? So we actually got to the redirection. So none of this really works yet because we haven't done any of the logic for that yet. But we know that our registration form works and the the credentials for the user actually works. So here, the next step now is to implement the login form and um, also the secret page, right? All right, so in order to implement the login, we're just go into the login. And again, we're going to use the same pattern that we did previously to have an alert, to initialize the alert. And then we're just gonna set alert equals success, result equals successfully logged in, and then we're gonna extract our post variables by using the extract again. Here we're going to create a new connection to the database. And again, it's the same code as we did in our registration page here. All right, but we're just going to select the new user from username. Well, we're going to do a SQL query of select user from users equals where username equals username, right? And then we're just going to get a single array of that user. Now, if the user is valid, if our query is successful and the user is valid, then this user object should contain our current user. And now we're going to check to make sure that it exists in the next step. Again, we can't, we should be able to navigate to the definition here, but we aren't able to. There's a reason why, right? So the reason is because we haven't pulled our database reference yet. Okay, so in order to do that, we're gonna bring in the database, just like we did earlier. Okay. So since we brought in our database there, remember to adjust the backslashes. Okay, now when we click through, we should be able to go directly to our array. Again, the array is simple, and get array is simple. It just fetches an associative array from our result set as an associative array, and we're just gonna check that. And we're gonna check our result set. Okay. And again, we want to free the result after we actually do the query. Okay. So the next step is to pretty much check to make sure the user object is not empty. This means that a user of that username actually exists within the database. And then finally, we're going to check, and then we're going to verify the password of that user. So if the user is empty, then we're gonna say, oh, username and password is not correct because we couldn't find the user in the database, right? We want to be vague about the error message here, so that we know that so that hackers don't know that it's actually a user that the user does actually exist in the system, and all they have to do now is hack the password. All right, so here we're going to initialize an error value, and we're going to set the error equal to 0, just like our other pattern in the registration form. And now now because we know that the user is not empty, right? Then we're going to check for the password. We're going to verify the password. But before that, we're going to put in some logic that indicates that the user has failed to log in if the login post was not successful. Here we're gonna say if the error equals is greater than 0, then we're gonna actually implement a logic here saying that display the structure because we initially set error equal to 1, so that will always be true unless we actually go into the login loop with a login logic. All right, so with that done, we're just gonna check the user password now. And we're also gonna bring in the display mechanism here. So we're gonna set user password equal to user password. And so this is the password from the database, and then we're also gonna verify our post password with the user password from the database. So this is the plain text post password. Okay, the way password verify works is that it actually matches it based on the hash that based on the algorithmic hash to validate whether or not a password is valid. So and the hash is always different, but it compares it based on an algorithm, not the value of the user password in this case. All right. And if the passwords matches, then we're just gonna pretty much again, we could actually go in and say, hey, be really specific about what we're selecting. But here we're just selecting all of the user objects, right? So again, we don't necessarily have to do that. Select star will suffice. All right. So yeah, now we're gonna verify the password, and because this statement returns true if this password verify object is true, right? Well, this password verify function resolves to be true. So if our password is right, then we're just gonna set the session username equals username, logged in equals true, and user ID equals user ID. And we're gonna have to start a session before we can actually store stuff into the session, right? So that's also another step. So we're going to set it to user ID. We're going to say user ID equals the actual user ID. Now we have to grab the user ID from somewhere, right? So the user ID itself is actually the part of the extract there. Now, before we can use the user ID, we have to instantiate it, right? So here we're trying to select a star from profile where user ID equals user ID, but we have to instantiate the user ID first. So we're just gonna grab the user ID from the user table that we, well, it'll be ID user, right? So we're gonna grab that from the database. And now that we set the session user ID equal to ID, we can access that from almost anywhere, right? So, and now we're gonna pull in the profile. So we're just gonna say profile equals array profile. Get array from this. Get the array from this profile from the SQL statement, and then assign it to profile as an array object. And now we're gonna store that profile object into. If the profile is not empty, we're going to store that profile object into the session. Now, this is good practice only for light data sets that you know is just going to return one, right? Otherwise, if you return multiple values into the session, it's going to flood your session, and you're going to have slow load times. Okay, so it's not optimal to have a really big array into this. Again, we're loading the profile into the session so that we can easily grab it, right? And without having to do a database call. Okay, so we're gonna save the page. Again, give one last look through to make sure there's no errors, right? So probably we're gonna close that connection, and that should complete our code. Trying to see if I think of anything else. Save the page. Now we can reload the page, and we can actually do the login. Okay, so as you can see, we're stacking these things again. So what that means is that we're actually including that logic in here. So we're only we have to filter it out somehow, right? So we're gonna put an if statement up here. If errors equals 0, then we'll display that. Okay, we're gonna have on the alert class up there so that it shows us whether or not we successfully clicked it right. So again, we're just pulling this code from the register page. Because we're using this so much, it's almost optimal for you to actually create an alert object and basically just in your page template and just call that object instead of having to inject this code in here. Here we're gonna redirect to the refer. So instead of the refer, we're actually gonna just redirect it directly to the lab 8. Well, secret.php. All right. So now we're going to redirect it to secret.php as soon as within 10 seconds whenever whenever we hit this logic. All right. So now if I refresh the page, it should be a login page, right? And user 99 is the user that we recently registered. So why didn't that work? It's not user 99, it's test 99 if I remember right. So right, so it's test 99. So I'm going to our login page. Test 99. It's the same password. And we log in. There we go. And so it works now. Let's see if our redirect works. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, and boom. So it goes to our secret page. Now the very last step we're going to do is we're going to secure our secret page. So again, we have the super secret page here, and now we're just going to secure this page. So to start with, we're just going to pull in the sessions. We're going to create a function at the very end here. All right, we're just going to say function logged in. Yep. So with this function logged in, we're going to pull in some code. We're going to say session start. Right, we're going to start the session. And then we're going to say if session, well, we're going to have the session array, right? The global session array. If session logged in, remember that this is the variable that we set earlier. So we're going to check for that variable. If that, we're going to check to see if it's set first. If it is set, and then we're going to go into this loop, into this logic. And now we're going to check to make sure that that variable, even if it's set, we're going to make sure that is set to the value that we actually want, right? Set it equal to. Again, it should be the same value that we're passing in. So if you look here, it's supposed to be true, right? So it should be the same name, right? So logged in, double equals true, right? So you want to make sure that that's equal, and then if that's equal, then we just return true, because this function all it's really doing is checking to make sure that we're actually logged in, and then otherwise we're going to return false. All right, so that returns false, And now at the very top of our page, all we're going to do is check for that. So if it, well, we don't need the is set, but we're going to check to see if logged in equals true. And put it after the OP start here. Alright, so we'll say if logged in equals true, then what are we gonna do? We're gonna pull in the profile. Right, so the profile, all we're just gonna do is gonna unserialize what we serialized earlier, right? Alright, so we're just gonna pull in all the values of the profile. This way we don't have to do a hop to the database to grab the user profile. Again, so user ID equals session user ID. It's actually within the profile as well, but we're just gonna do it this way. And then we're gonna extract that profile. And now we're just gonna pretty much print out the values of that profile. And I'm doing this in a card method again. So you'll have to take the time to actually go and do this. You can display it any way you want. I just chose to do it in a card method again. So again, it's a card method. You can pause the screen here and actually just follow this code. It's really straightforward. Again, I have a small width class here, and I'm just going to my styles.css, and I'm just going to set the class small width equals 600 pixels. I could have used the login form, but I wanted to separate the two. So that's all right. So after that, I just pretty much echo out all the properties of the profile. Again, here first name would equals first underscore name, last underscore name, because these are the values on the database, all right? Right, and then I actually have a logout link on the bottom here, and we're going to implement the logout page next. Right, so with that said, we should be able to go to our page and pretty much see what it looks like now. Again, I do have an uptick edit profile here that will just take you to the profile page when you click on it. So it is towards the bottom there. Um, so when I click on that, it will create a. Now, we also want to have something that says, "Hey, you didn't log in. You didn't log in yet." Um, if it's false, then we're gonna go and we're gonna display the message here to log to go back to the login page. All right. So again, we have that edit click profile button on the right hand side. So we're gonna bring in the JavaScript to actually do the navigation to the edit profile. And that should happen right after that div. The link, the link here. We don't really need the actual ID because we already have it. So we're just gonna get rid of that because we're already passing in the ID here. So we don't need it. We need to grab it from anywhere. So we're just gonna get rid of the ID. I'm just gonna get rid of that ID. And now when we actually call this profile, when we actually click that edit profile button, it's gonna open up our profile. All right, so this is a copy and paste from from the profile page. We just left out the image. Right, now we save this. If I refresh this page, you see all of my info is here. All right, so I can log out through that link. If I edit my profile, it'll take me to the edit profile page. And then I can actually do an image upload. And just pick something small. All right, so I can choose my Batman photo, and then I just do save, and that's it. Close this out. Back to lab 8. All right. Test 99. If I log in, go to super secret page. There's my profile. All right, so that's kind of how it's supposed to work. And now you go to the logout page. It's gonna scream at you because we haven't created that page yet. So we're gonna create a logout page. All right, so logout page is be pretty much the same as all the other pages, except here we're just gonna kill the query. All right, we're gonna kill the sessions in our logout page. Again, we're just gonna copy some code here. The header, right? We need a PHP on the top there. Right, so type logout in there. All right, so that's the header right there, and now we're just gonna implement the footer. I'm gonna do OB start first here, and then we're gonna close this off, and then we're gonna do the footer after this. Gonna set R equals OB get clean, page content equals R. All right. Finally, we're just gonna end up say you have successfully logged out. All right, so we refresh this page. It's just gonna pretty much say you have successfully logged out. So that's pretty much the gist of it. But to really truly log out, you have to kill the session. You have to really log out from the entire system. All right. So here, what we're gonna do is we're gonna kill the session. We're gonna set the session array equals 0. But before we do that, we actually want to start the session. So one of the really cool tricks here is to actually implement the session right within your template, so you don't have to keep doing session start. So hypothetically, every page should have a session, but here I'm just demonstrating this to show you how you can do this. So again, you want to pause the video here so you can actually copy this code. This is pretty much standard PHP, the standard PHP logout session code that you can grab directly from php.net. All right, so again, we're gonna kill all the cookies. We're gonna delete all the cookies by doing init get cookie user cookies, and then params cookie. We're gonna set those cookies to such a name blank, and then pretty much set the time minus 4200, and then clear out all the paths there, because we're actually injecting the cookie with nothing. And here we're just gonna show a logout message using a card format again. All right, so you can pause the video here and actually just implement this code here, and then we have the set counter interval down here as well, and we're just going to do a header redirect after you have logged out to the main page. So we're going to do a refresh. It's going to count down, and it's going to redirect to the main page. So what we're going to do here is we're going to copy the we're going to copy the code from register, and we're going to paste it into here to do the refresh, because it seemed to have failed. So after we paste it in here, it's this code right here, how to refresh. And
oh my god! My game just froze! Oh shoot! My game's easy!
so we'll see why it doesn't work. So for example, this should work, but it didn't redirect, right? So we're gonna go back to the other page, and then we're gonna see if we can actually do the logout. All right, so you basically copy that code in, all right, and then just refresh the page, and you should be able to log out. After you log out, you try to attempt to go back to the secret page, it should say that you are not logged in. Okay, so let's try that again. We can go through here and just update Scott Summers' page. If I log out, it should redirect me to the main page, right? And it does. So again, I'm gonna register. Oh well, I'm just gonna log in. Okay. Now, again, if we go to the secret page, then let's go back to the login page. If I go to the secret page, we should see this. We'll change Scott's picture. Not sure why there's a disconnect there, but okay. Save. All right. Now go back to lab 8. Log in. Alright, so the walkthrough should actually work pretty well now. Alright, so this is pretty much it for lab 8. All you really have to do now is apply this to the rest of the lab, to the rest of your site, right? So here, when you go out to the Metro site, I've already implemented this. So when you actually go to login, well, when you actually go to the to my demo site out on Metro State, all you have to do is see how I want this applied, right? So when you actually go to the login here, the login page, it does look like the Lab 8 page, but it's not really the same. So if I log in as user C, right, and I'm logged in now, if I get redirected to the current page, then you see that all of my theme changes. You see that all the colors change, my picture changes. If I click on my profile here, it takes me out to my profile page. And then if I change the colors here, right, and change it to black, or, well, we'll just go black, right? And then save it. It doesn't apply right away, right? But if I log out and log back in, then the session variables get reset. There's a way you can do that too. If you actually reset all the session variables, see now that I log back in, the theme changes accordingly, right? So it changed according to my user profile. So yeah, that's the application part of the lab. And if you if you implement this, you'll find out that your project actually pretty much calls for this. So yeah, it's in your best interest to actually try this out. Have a login system that actually changes the profile once you log in, and changes the look and feel of the site once you log in based on the user's preferences. All right. Now I did color because it's probably the most simple thing to adjust. You can certainly do other things, but color is probably the easiest things to adjust within a application. And that is it for this lab. Feel free to hit me up on Teams if you need help, or send an email, and I will be more than happy to answer your questions. Thank you all.